Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Sean and this is Mountains Garage YouTube channel in the beautiful state of Maine. Almost 50 degrees today, not bad for February. I'm a little bit distracted because it's sick week in Florida, and due to the excellent live coverage on YouTube, Tom Bailey's channel, I've been trying to keep up with the goings on. I think the night driving or driving between the tracks is just as interesting as what happens on the track. I've never participated in a drag and drive event, but I certainly like the idea. Today's video, I get asked a lot of questions nightly, and every time I build somebody a transmission, I give them a few warnings about how not to destroy or hurt their Turbo 400 transmission they just paid quite a bit of money for. I did one last week for a guy who, believe it or not, is 3 or 4 hours north of me, and it's gonna go in a mud truck. Now that's not my normal arena I would build a transmission for. And when he was picking it up, he was showing me a video of what happened to the last transmission, where he was just out in front of his house and he took off, was doing a burnout in first and second while the tires were spinning, and that was the end of second gear. Again, combined with a lot of questions I get nightly, this video is how to destroy or harm your Turbo 400 transmission. It's a really rugged design. It's great. We all love it. That's why we're still talking about it. That's why I do a lot of videos about it. It's my transmission of choice, given the choices. But it has some built-in character flaws. The first area we need to talk about is not the transmission's fault at all. It is yours if you don't know what to ask for or what you want inside your transmission to match up with your horsepower level and the weight of your vehicle. You need to have enough knowledge to know that you want certain parts. Specifically, you definitely want a heavy-duty intermediate sprag. 34 element or bigger. They come bigger. 34 element will get most of us what we need. You need a manual valve body if you're going to be racing it. It's just a good idea in general for the same reason, like I just mentioned, that monster truck. A Turbo 400, you need to start your burnout in second and shift second to third. Hence the need for a manual valve body. You can't do that with an automatic shifting valve body. If you have to use 1, 2, 3 to do a burnout, as soon as you spin the tires in first, put it in second. As gentle as possible, and then second and third, you can do what you want. That's going to keep the intermediate sprag alive. The intermediate sprag is splined into the clutches that are splined into the case, and its job is to stop the direct drum. That's about 9 pounds, spinning a lot of RPM, and when the intermediate clutches grab the sprag, that puts the power flow through the planetaries for second gear. You would call that a design flaw, but it does work. And I guess we'll leave it right there at that for now. This is the intermediate sprag on the back of the direct drum. Another area you need to be concerned with if you're the builder is that this inner sprag race is 3.159. If it's a half a thousandth smaller than that, you probably need a liner or a different drum. So this can get worn and be too small. It only takes a second to measure it. If you're shopping for parts, this is the correct round back drum, I call it, that will accept a 34 element Borg-Warner sprag. There are 3 types of sprags used in the Turbo 400. Most of these came with a 16 element, but still round. You can take that off, put the 34 right on. And this, if I took it apart, is a ramp style with rollers. You can tell because it squeaks. If you're making a lot of horsepower, an aluminum direct drum is certainly going to help the longevity of the intermediate sprag. And typically, if you buy an aluminum drum, it has at least a 36 element sprag on it. There is at least one company that does make a spragless design. I believe there's only one company that has done that. And to be honest, I have no experience with it to know if it works well or not. Typical route is to go with the aluminum drum and a larger intermediate sprag. And that's about as good as it gets. While you're right there with the intermediate clutches, the stock Turbo 400 case has lugs that the snap ring sits in. You need a heavy duty snap ring right there. The factory snap ring is way too thin to handle any power. It'll pop out and pop the lugs off the case like little chiclets. And a case saver, you'll see me show it many times, is a void in the case where there's no lugs. That case saver bolts in where the front band used to be, or if you want to retain the front band, they make a style that will let you do that as well. With either style case saver, your intermediate snap ring will be supported much better than it was from the factory. While we're still talking about the direct drum, we got to talk safety and valve body design. I don't know what happens to a person's thought process, but you can probably think of many people right off the top of your head that have no problem spending tons of money under the hood. But the wallet shuts right here with the transmission bolts on it. From there back, I guess they're going to rely on luck. Here's why it's dangerous in a Turbo 400. If you put the transmission in neutral, when you go through the traps, and let's say your engine's only spinning 7,000 RPMs, when you release the direct clutch, the direct drum accelerates to 17,500. It's a 9-pound piece of cast metal that's never meant to do that. And let's just say you don't put it in neutral manually. Let's say your engine quits. Same difference. When you exhaust the oil out of it, that drum is going to accelerate, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to explode and come through the floor. So people that think they don't need safety devices must have complete control over, their stock bottom LS, and they're never going to put the rods out of it and have that thing stop on the top end. I can think of a dozen people right now that rely on luck. Sorry, I got distracted again. I just watched Aiden Bailey, Tom Bailey's son, go 825 in that station wagon, 57 Chevy station wagon. That's cool. Valve body design is a couple of buzzwords, if you will. You can buy a valve body with clean neutral or safe neutral. What is that? You want to make sure, and you want to talk to the valve body manufacturer. An ideal situation where you have park reverse, neutral, 1, 2, 3, and then another neutral. That's the safety or clean neutral, depending on who builds the valve body and what they call it. What needs to happen is the forward clutch fluid needs to be exhausted. So you're disconnecting the engine from the transmission. If you don't want to have the engine come down in RPM as you're slowing down, you want to disconnect the transmission from the engine, but you're going to keep the oil in the direct clutch so the drive shaft doesn't accelerate the drum to levels where it wants to explode. So you need to exhaust the oil out of the forward clutch, and the rest needs to stay engaged. So that is clean or safe neutral in a nutshell. Make sure if you think you have it, call up your valve body manufacturer and ask what actually happens, because you don't want to explode the direct drum. Here's one of the simplest ways to destroy your Turbo 400. Improper fluid level. When you buy your dipstick or source your dipstick, the fluid mark, the full mark, needs to line right up with this inner pan rail inside the pan. If it requires you to pull the pan off to double check that, do it. It depends on what pan the transmission has. Most of the ones I build have extra capacity, a deep pan. So I tell the owner of the transmission to put 4 or 5 quarts in before you start the engine and let it idle, and put in another 4 anyway. So by the time you got 8 or 9 quarts in there, it's time to run the transmission through the gears at idle with the wheels off the ground if possible, nice and gentle. And you're going to want to check the oil many times on both sides of the dipstick. When you pull the stick out, wipe it off, put it back in, pull it out and look at both sides of it until everything settles down and it reads the same on both sides. That means you got all the bubbles in the air, whatever's going on in there, and you've maybe gently road tested it a couple times, if possible. If this is a drag race only vehicle, you're probably going to warm it up in the pits on jack stands and make your best guess. But it's going to consume almost a case of oil in most cases. By the time you're starting out fresh, you got to fill the transmission cooler lines in the cooler, and you have a deep pan on a Turbo 400 with a 8, 9, 10 inch converter, you're going to have 11 or 12 quarts in it anyway. And don't forget to factor in temperature on the effect of the level in the dipstick. If you have, let's say, a bunch of cross hatches, which is the acceptable full level, and the oil is on the cold side, you want to be at the bottom of that because it'll grow a quarter of an inch on the stick potentially. So when the oil gets hot, you don't want to be over full when the oil expands because you're going to push some out the vent potentially. There are several internet perpetuated myths about the Turbo 400. The most popular one probably is the increasing the pressure in the Turbo 400 is going to wear your pump out. I've never experienced that. And most transmission builders, if you go on the online forums, neither have they. You are far more likely to wipe the transmission out if you don't increase the pressure. You're not going to wear the pump out, but you're going to wear everything else out. Nobody seems to worry when they increase the engine oil pressure and you make another 20 or 30 pounds. Why are you worried about the transmission? As hydraulics go, that are normally measured in the thousands, we're only talking a couple hundred PSI that is regulated with a path right back to the pan. It has a relief valve right next to the gears. I don't get it. The next one is fluid. Personally, I don't care what you put in for fluid as long as the transmission is full. I have my preferences. I'll just take normal Dextron 3. Dextron 6, I actually have a couple cases and I'm going to put it in my transmission because I have it in the shed. In the past, many times I've used a low viscosity Tractor Supply or whatever brand hydraulic fluid, tractor oil. That works great too. I put a little bit of red in it for color, but you don't have to. 1/4 ATF just to make it red. Some people run compressor oil. My last choice would be Ford Type F. I've never liked the smell of it. I've seen what happens when it varnishes up inside the Ford automatics. Some people swear by it. That's early 70s technology at best. So most of the time, just give me Dextron and go. Don't worry about it again. And clutch material. What the clutches are made out of and what style. I believe up into a very high limit, it just doesn't matter. I could build you a transmission with a bunch of clutches I have under my bench that are OEM. And with the proper hydraulic circuits that are sound and increased pressure, with the stock amount of clutches, 3 in the intermediate, 5 and 5 in the forward and direct, you can go a long ways horsepower wise. We've covered this subject a lot. I like to put extra clutches in. A lot of times it's a necessity. If, for instance, you have a piston that's, is going to allow you to do that. I have boxes of clutches by the 100. If it makes the customer happy, it's, not going to hurt anything. Some say it may take more power to run them, but But material is not as important as proper hydraulics. And we'll close on this one. A very popular way to destroy your Turbo 400 or any automatic transmission is to have rubber hose and hose clamps on your cooler lines. Believe it or not, if you have to do that, they make automatic transmission cooler line. Now, it's not fuel line. Fuel line's rated for 30 pounds. Actual transmission rubber line is rated for 200. That's better. And if you used a smooth EFI style hose clamp over a barb that you put in the metal line you were going to slide the rubber over, that's better. But let's just say not use rubber and hose clamps at all. They should be solid metal. If you want flexible, either make them out of braided steel line or hydraulic lines. You know, go to your local tractor place or auto parts store and have them make you some rubber lines with, you know, the proper fittings. But if you're going to run rubber hose and clamps, good luck. Well, that's enough of me talking today. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. If you didn't, I still do. Enjoy the rest of your week. Spring is coming, despite what that pesky groundhog had to say. And I'll catch you in a couple days.